Peace, family. My name is Vicki Dillard for African Diaspora News Channel. Thank you so much for tuning in. Family, today you can actually see today's broadcast, today's episode, as a second part of a series that I'm basically doing under different names, but definitely related to what is considered to be either malfeasance, alleged criminality, or certainly evidence related to there too related to the Epstein class type folk that goes back many decades. Yes, and their connection to the citizenry, how that really works from neighborhood to neighborhood. I'm bringing this up specifically related to the Nation of Islam's um, community security group. Years ago, they were so effective throughout the country in different cities. They so effective in reducing crime in troubled Black communities, different projects and so forth, that they were actually affectionately called DopeBusters. And they made the news, received glowing headlines from throughout the community in different states. So very effective they were that they actually won government contracts until it was sabotaged by government officials. So you are listening. So make sure that at the time of this airing that you check out my other part to this related to whether or not the Epstein class types feared such groups as the Dope Busters. Now, this goes back years, but some folks may or may not be familiar with it. And I want to connect some dots in terms of principally to why we should consider reinstituting uh, patrolling and controlling our own communities, and how that would very likely have an outsized impact on actually what's happening around the world in the wake of these recent files. Now, believe it or not, an element of the sabotage of the successful um, dope buster group, which are again mostly members of the Nation of Islam years ago, that were effective in patrolling the community and keeping them safe and keeping drugs and crime out and down. Can you believe a banker? Wells Fargo. Yes, you heard me right. Now, when I revisited elements of the sabotage of the security groups, community security groups, first they were volunteer, of course, and were so effective in what they did. It was important that they were doing it full time. And so, again, they won contracts that seemed to me very reasonable to pay our family to be on patrol on a consistent basis. And they were quite effective in doing it in ways that police were not in other organizations. Yes. Well, in the article that I'm reading here from, I think it was 1996 Washington Post piece, it's a very long article, but when we go down to this particular section, it talks about, it was talking about leading up to what I'm calling the sabotage, the intentional engineering of the sabotage of their security groups. And it says this: between November 1992 and May 1994, NOI patrolled Baltimore low-income housing without a contract, working under a non-competitive purchase requisition and earning $1.5 million. In late 1993, the city sought bids for the contract, and NOI won. Y'all see that? So when the city sought bids, to be fair, to keep it open to other people to at least try, they sought bids, but the NOI, which stands for the Nation of Islam, they won, although it says it was not the lowest bidder. Wells Fargo Guard Services, Inc. You heard that right. Wells Fargo Guard Services, Inc. had submitted a bid for 1.1 million lower. When Wells Fargo challenged the award, housing officials said other criteria had been used to evaluate the bids. They said the NOI's record established that it had lowered crime at trouble projects. Letters from Mayfield Mansion and Paradise Manor were included in the bid. So they not only had apparently ostensibly testimonials, but they had a record. How many of y'all know a track record matters to keep crime down, drugs out? That matters. And don't y'all find it suspicious that Wells Fargo Inc. security company was doing this? Watch, it doesn't stop there. Wells Fargo, it said, sued the Baltimore Housing Authority in 1994 and filed a protest with HUD saying procurement regulations were violated. HUD audited and found that NOI guards had no special training and that the authority was, quote, placing its residents at risk by allowing guards to work prior to being certified. Among the 173 guards whose backgrounds were checked, 29 had been convicted of felonies, according to the report. According to the report, it says working conditions questions also surfaced about the company's finances. NOI reported to HUD that it had paid its Baltimore guards $11 an hour, while Wells Fargo paid $8.23 per hour. But former NOI guards disputed that claim, saying their hourly pay never reached $11. Family, is so much more in this article, but I wanted to get down to that part because, like I said, I'm basically, you consider this to be part 2 of the series. What's crazy is that Wells Fargo has such a long anti-Black and atrocious history. Some would allege criminal history, but they managed to pay settlements and keep it civil, even though some have disputed that their activities should have risen, I should say, to the level of criminality, even though what I'm fixing to talk to you about now has to do with mostly civil stuff. For example, if we look at this article from Bachman Law, these are just one of several things in which Wells Fargo has gotten in trouble specifically related to Black people. This says $35 million settlement reached in race discrimination / glass ceiling case. African American financial advisors at Wells Fargo have reached a proposed $35 million settlement to resolve their class action lawsuit, which asserts that racial glass ceiling for promotion and pay existed at the company. A federal judge in the Illinois North District Court in Chicago must still approve the class action settlement. If approved, the $35 million settlement would be a split among approximately 365 African American class members. The class action complaint contends that Wells Fargo maintains stereotypical views about the skills, abilities, and potential of African Americans in general, which influenced the reported discriminatory treatment of its African American financial advisors. It goes on giving details about the complaint and that the company's wealth management business is centrally controlled by headquarters, where all white team of senior executive issued mandatory company policies that apply to Wells Fargo's financial advisor employees. It talked about how the discrimination at Wells Fargo reportedly involved, among other things, excluding African American financial advisors from lucrative teams of financial advisors, using client account transfer and distribution policies and practices that disproportionately steer lucrative clients away from African American financial advisors, and employing centralized compensation policies and practices that unfairly harm African American advisors. Now, that's just one of many cases, right? Then we've got the DOJ settlement suit with Wells Fargo. How many of y'all remember hearing about that? This piece is from 2012, where the DOJ settles a discrimination suit with Wells Fargo Bank to provide $175 million relief. In that particular instance, on July 12, 2012, the U.S. Department of Justice announced a $175 million settlement in the department's history to resolve allegations that Wells Fargo engaged in a pattern of practice of discrimination against qualified African American and Hispanic borrowers in mortgage lending from 2004 through 2009. How many of y'all know that was during the Great Recession? Under the settlement, Wells Fargo will provide $125 million in compensation for wholesale borrowers who were steered into subprime mortgages or who paid higher fees and rates than white borrowers because of their race or national origin, and a $50 million in direct down payment assistance to borrowers in communities around the country. This goes on and on, family. Did y'all hear what I said right there? Then, in this case, this is reported from this law firm with Crump and them, which I don't like to get into him because I don't too much care for his little strange policies, Attorney Crump, but nevertheless, it's still information in this piece where it says civil rights attorney Ben Crump and plaintiffs say Wells Fargo discriminatory mortgage practices are killing Black opportunity and preventing Black families and neighborhoods from thriving. This piece, family, is talking about renowned civil rights attorney Ben Crump, co-counsel Linda Friedman and Susan Bish of Stoll and Friedman, plaintiffs and class members in the ongoing litigation against Wells Fargo today, called on Wells Fargo shareholders to adopt a motion brought by SEIU for a racial equity audit, and called on mayors around the country to follow New York City Mayor Eric Adams' lead in freezing business with Wells Fargo. The plaintiffs and attorneys said Wells Fargo discriminatory practices are killing Black opportunities. They were talking about attorneys filed a class action lawsuit against Wells Fargo on behalf of victims of racial redlining and lending discrimination on February 17th, 2022 in the Northern District of California. And it talks about the case. And then they did a news conference in Atlanta. Plaintiffs and class members highlighted the pattern of racial discrimination experienced by a series of Black Wells Fargo customers and encouraging others to come forward if they had similar banking while Black. This goes on, talk about Black homeowners there and on and on and on. Baby, Wells Fargo, the list, it just does not stop. Also, when you look at a CNBC report, I mean, we just be all day long, just it's outrageous. From CNBC, regulators caught Wells Fargo, other banks in probe over mortgage pricing discrimination. The key points here is Wells Fargo received an official notice from the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau on problems with its use of mortgage rates discounts. Wells Fargo hired a law firm to grill mortgage bankers whose sales included high levels of discounts. Several banks received MRAs about lending practices last year without naming any of the institutions in the industry. In the industry review, regulators found statistically significant disparities in the rates in which Black and female borrowers got pricing exceptions compared with other customers. I mean, baby, we'll be here all day long talking about Wells Fargo. So I'm trying to see how in the hell can this historically known anti-Black Wells Fargo, who comes up with all kinds of creative violations of laws against Black in the past and the present, these were the ones that filed a suit against a proven successful security group and then filed a complaint with HUD to try to outbid them. I would be interested in looking at some of the other hands that were behind it, but guess what we found? Some of the very people that are connected to the nation of Netanyahu appear to have been connected to those that were complaining about the Nation of Islam's success in the community, mess making, and other Epstein-like individuals. Can you imagine if our brothers were still on the beat full time like this, fully supported, able to take care of their families, the condition that our communities and our businesses would be in? Can you imagine that it would be far less people subjected to trafficking if we were able to police our own communities like we did? I think we need to pick up that banner again, and we need to figure out other types of funding so that not only the NOI, but other groups can continue to do so, like we're seeing some other groups like in Detroit and elsewhere. I can't wait to see what you have to say about this. I found this very interesting. And I'm wondering what else can be done related to Wells Fargo Bank in light of all this. And why would a bank get involved in mess making with a successful Black security group? And who else put them up to it? My name is Vicki Dillard, beloved. Be sure to go to my website at vickiplanet.com to purchase some of my products and services. I have a very low-cost school called the Vicki Dillard Mystery School, where I'm giving divine insight, and my students are coming away with all kinds of manifestations. And in their life, I use universal spiritual principles. That means it don't matter what your spiritual background, what your religious background. My school does not stick to one or the other because you can learn from my universal principles. Go to vickiplanet.com to learn more. I can't wait to see you again.